Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all here. I'd like to start by thanking Scott Pantel and his crew for organizing this week's events and for giving us all an excuse to gather. Today, we've assembled a panel of active venture investors from across the globe, Tel Aviv, Silicon Valley, Paris, and Boston, to engage in a lively and open discussion about the current state of medtech and healthcare investment. We'll touch on unmet needs, markets and their dynamics, investment strategies, portfolio companies, and the teams that drive them. I am Ryan McGinnis, Commercial General Manager at Triple Ring Technologies. Triple Ring is the co-development company. We stand shoulder to shoulder with innovators and entrepreneurs to solve hard problems, build breakthrough devices, and launch companies. Our headquarters are in Silicon Valley. We also have offices in Boston, Copenhagen, and Toronto. Triple Ring is a large group of doers with deep experience in designing and developing complex devices for healthcare, medical device, and life sciences markets. So we're going to begin our session, thank you very much,
sure,
with brief introductions from each of our panelists, starting with Irit.
Thank you.
Down the end.
So, Irit Yaniv, I'm the CEO of Almeda Venture. I'll speak about Almeda later on. Just 2 words about myself. I'm a physician, many years in the operational side of medtech companies, and for the last 10 years on the investment side.
Yeah. Andy, please.
Sure, yeah, I'll dive in. So, my own background, kind of mix of business and engineering. Did the biodesign fellowship, if you're familiar with that, at Stanford University, and that's where I got to know most of the team that I'm working with now at Sonder. So we raised a fund, $100 million fund, early stage medtech. Can talk a little bit more about what early stage and medtech means to us.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, team of 5 partners. I think 2 of them have already had some decent airtime in Jay Watkins and Fred Mall. So those are probably our headliners.
Great, yeah. And Lukas, please.
My name is Lukas Guenther. I work for Paris-based Sofinnova, specifically for the Medtech accelerator called MD Start. My personal background is surgery. I've been trained in general surgery, have worked clinically for a number of years, and have joined the industry about 15 years ago.
Great, thanks.
Great.
Megan, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And I'm McGibbon. I'm a senior associate at SV Health Investors based in Boston, although despite the Boston accent, I'm actually originally from Ireland. I spent the first few years of my career more on the kind of product development side, doing research and development engineering for a startup. And then, of course, like all startups, wearing a lot of different hats once we got kind of FDA clearance for our lead product, I decided I needed to learn a little bit more about business. So that's when I moved to the US to go to business school. And then I did some life sciences consulting as well before starting my venture career with SV a few years ago. So yeah, really excited that there's another great MedTech conference to bring me over the side of the pond.
Yeah, very nice. Okay, well, we're just going to jump right in. And my first question is for Irit. And can you speak about the unique structure of Almeda?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and how it accommodates the global collaboration.
Yeah, thank you. As part of my entrepreneur life, I would say, I established 2 companies, and I saw the pros and cons of a regular private VC. And then when I had a chance to build up my own VC, we tried to think about a different structure. So the structure that we have decided to go is a public VC. So our VC is traded in Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, what allows us to raise more money on the go, which means that this is an evergreen fund and we can continue and invest in our initial investment more and more. There is no end for our VC. We can always go back and raise money from the public and invest a little bit more in specific companies that we believe in. We established the company, the fund 2 years ago. We have raised up to now $30 million, invested in 10 companies. We invest in medical device and digital health. So we have about 50% medical device and 50% digital health up to date.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And Andy, Sonder's model is very hands-on. and based on these often consultative relationships with your portfolio companies. How do you maintain that? Is it a challenge to build these kinds of relationships, especially if you're looking outside of the United States?
Yeah. Yes. But no. I think we closed the fund January 2020. So we have really been operating in a COVID world the entire time we've been operating this fund. And so for us, I think, that's been an interesting learning experience for us. I mean, for us coming out now, being in the real world, so to speak, and in person is new for us as a venture fund. So, we're used to working with our portfolio companies, and I think it's interesting to hear your structure, because I think philosophically, we see this gap in early stage medtech investing, and that's what we tried to solve for. We didn't necessarily start out to do a fund, spend a lot of legal bills to understand that for us, at least, the fund structure was what had to work. And our goal is partnership with the companies. And part of that also is somewhat of an ecosystem play where we're looking at our LPs who are primarily single family offices who are interested in investing directly and trying to bring them closer to the companies. So for us, it's great because we get to partner closely, do the work that we love to do as kind of operators and innovators by background, helping companies at those early stages, while also simultaneously educating a whole new group of people who should be investing and want to be investing in medtech but just don't understand it. So we're trying to bring them along in the journey too. Yeah,
interesting. And that's one of the things that struck me about this panel is we have two groups that were born in the COVID age, and then two groups that represent some of the longest existing venture companies on the planet. And imagine we could talk a bit about that. And Lukas, so Sofinnova has a tight focus on specific products and specific solutions to unmet needs, as opposed to maybe more platform plays that you might think through. And that's an interesting approach, but how do markets and geographies factor into that focusing process?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's important to mention that MD Start is just one of the strategies that we have within Sofinnova. I think what you just mentioned is an overarching theme that we have within all the strategies, but it's also important to mention how MD Start works, because it's an accelerator, incubator, and what we do within MD Start is we source the most interesting breakthrough medical device technologies, and we bring them in-house, we incubate them over time, and trying to reach first in human within the incubation time, and then we help these companies to raise the Series A. We slowly fade out. We bring in experienced management at some point, but it also means that with regards to where we source those technologies, we are looking globally, and we have quite a number of relationships built up over time with TTOs from top-tier universities. We have scouts out there in the field, but we also have a very, very strong network of entrepreneurs, medtech entrepreneurs that have been associated or are still associated with Sofinnova partners, and basically drop us a line if they see something interesting out there.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, and then Megan, SV Health Ventures has a long history of success in building companies and launching products. So can you tell us more about the Medtech Convergence Fund?
Sure, yeah. So the Medtech Convergence Fund is actually a fund we raised just during COVID as well, actually. But its focus is on kind of medtech, but the intersection of medtech and software more specifically. And that's, so 60% of the fund is kind of allocated towards that theme. And it's really just this this realization that we had about, there are a lot of unmet needs in healthcare that can actually be solved now with medtech that can be kind of connected to the providers and different service backends to enable patients, mostly with chronic diseases, prevent kind of really negative health outcomes and solve problems for the patient on the clinical side, but also create value for payers and the system more broadly. And yeah, we, in terms of geography, most of the funds in or most of the companies in our fund to date have been US companies, but we definitely look internationally. And I think one good example of that is just last week I was at a board meeting for one of our companies called Perfuse, and they've actually just got FDA clearance for a large bore catheter for the treatment of acute ischemic stroke. And they've done that on very limited capital, and I think that's something that we see a lot more. We see a lot more, opportunities for limited capital to get to significant milestones from companies in Europe than sometimes is possible in the US. So it's definitely an area that we're interested in, and of course I am probably more biased towards looking at the European startup scene as well.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so the focus this week at the conference is on medtech innovation and the companies that are driving it. Our audience, there are in the audience are some of the world's most promising startups and early stage companies, and many of the professionals who are here to help them on their journeys to market. I'd like to give the audience an opportunity to learn about how each of you invest and what you require to make your investment decisions. And can we start with you, Megan, please?
Sorry.
How do you invest? And so give them an idea of how you invest and what you require to make your investment decisions.
Oh, sure, yeah. So I think, just...
And also, I'm sorry, if you could think of a portfolio company that kind of exemplifies your approach to the and thesis for investment.
Sure. Yeah. So I think a good example for us would be Podimetrics, and that's a company in the diabetic foot ulcer space, and they basically just have a mat that it's very, very low touch for the patient to use, but it just basically monitors the patient's feet for the appearance of areas which might be high risk for the development of diabetic foot ulcers. And seems like a very simple technology. It's got a little bit more complicated back end, but what's interesting about the company is that they've been able to show a 90% reduction in diabetic foot ulcers. And as a lot of people know, once a diabetic foot ulcer appears, it can be really debilitating for patients and oftentimes leads to amputation. So the company actually showed around 90% reduction in amputations as well. And so that's really attractive for patients, and it's also really attractive for payers. And they see like a really near-term return on investment for the device. They can, they've seen cost savings of $10,000 a year for these patients. So it kind of becomes an easier conversation than when you're trying to commercialize a product like that. And then I think for entrepreneurs and kind of for us, how we're thinking about technologies like that, it has to be something that, the outcomes, if you improve the outcomes, it really creates value for patients, and you have to have a team that really recognizes, who the customer is, what's the value that's created, how do you actually, build a business model around that so that you're providing the best value for the patient and also, for the payer as well. So I think, the message probably is, technology is hard, commercial is also hard and can be very nuanced, and, as much time needs to be kind of spent understanding that. So I think that's kind of mainly what we think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, patients, customers, and value. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. Okay, and Lukas, a similar question. If you can kind of describe through an example portfolio company how it is that you guys approach your investments.
Yeah, very happy to. So first of all, I think the medical need, Megan, that you just described is in the center of all the strategies that we have within Sofinnova. Just for MD Start, this is much earlier technologies as one can imagine. And a good showcase that I can mention is Gradient Innovation Technologies. It's a company that has presented earlier today, and this describes a little bit on how we work and how we approach things. The technology from this comes out of the Stanford program, biodesign program, and there have been two clinician founders that at some point decided to go back to their clinical careers, and the program needed to push financially, but also with regards to manpower. And we have negotiated with the founders, with Stanford, a transition that we can in-license the patents into a new co that is now based in Paris, and we have done the initial steps. It's one of the things we do to get all the fundamentals right in a company and in a new medtech endeavor, and we've been going through the steps of development. We currently are now in the safety study in animals, and hopefully can start and will start the first in human beginning of next year. And what's also typical, we at some point fade out of the operational aspects as a team, and we attract external management. We've been very lucky to attract Marty Grassi, who has presented earlier today, as a CEO who has experience in the field of ablation. And Gradient, just to mention this, is a company that treats patients with pulmonary hypertension on top of heart failure. So heart failure is the theme here. It's a patient group that is completely underserved. There's no medical treatment available. There's no medtech-based treatment available. These patients who develop the pulmonary hypertension on top of the heart failure, they go downhill very quickly. So we're developing a technology, in minimally invasive endovascular technology that ablates the nerves, the sympathetic nerves around the pulmonary artery to treat this specific condition.
Yeah. I saw that presentation earlier today, right? And it was one of these that was so packed with information. It's amazing to see how much information could be packed into an 8-minute. It's good that it's recorded so you can go back and review. So, Andy, similar question, but also, Lukas had mentioned biodesign. You're an alum, and that informs a lot of what you do. So, again, with a portfolio company, can you describe how you go about it?
Yeah, sure. And maybe kind of scoping in our investable universe and kind of how we think of early stage in medtech. So for us, early stage, that means typically entering at a seed or Series A, but we like to get to know the entrepreneurs and the opportunity much earlier than that. So the earlier that we can get to know the opportunity, the more that we can, understand it, help provide input. I mean, we're free consulting if you can get our time. You could think of us that way. And then I think in the context of what is medtech to us, we've focused primarily on devices, diagnostics, and health tech. Within diagnostics and health tech, we take a fairly narrow field of view, but definitely still something that we're following. And so, one more layer on that, I guess, would be we're looking for something that does have that kind of transformational impact, either on patient outcomes, access to care, or how we do business in healthcare. And so that's kind of how we first start approaching that. And I know that last bucket of how we do business in healthcare might be a little bit vague. So how does that look like in practice? What we've done is basically rolled up this ad hoc investment activity that the team had been doing for, 10 years or so, leading up to the formation of Sonder, where the model was go get to know those entrepreneurs earlier, help them raise some capital. I think like Reflection Medical, Shockwave is a great example of that type of model, how that looks today now that we're in a fund structure. I'll pick one company from the portfolio that I will not name, but they were a couple Stanford electrical engineering PhDs, had a great idea. One of the strategic companies, one of the large caps, saw the promise in the technology. So they were actually coming to us, not in the context of, hey, can you invest in us? But, hey, we have this potential structured deal or acquisition from a large cap. Can you help us kind of wrap our head around what that would look like? So we actually consulted for them, like literally consulted for them before we even considered making an investment. End of the day, the deal didn't happen, and we got to know the opportunity, and we loved it. Not to mention, it already did have some de-risking. We'll put that aside. But so that's something where we worked very closely with them beforehand. They're first-time entrepreneurs, literally straight out of their PhD. So we like that. You don't get serial entrepreneurs if there's no first time. So
yeah, Irit, can you also?
Yeah, so for us, early stage means a little bit late than what you all spoke about. And the main reason is because we are a public fund, we have to show some results and we have to commit to the time and the duration of those results. So we cannot take a very early stage risk. So in MedTech, what we are looking for are companies before pivotal study. While they reach this stage, we can actually better assess the history, what the team achieved so far, and then we can estimate how much time it will take them to complete a pivotal study. We can better assume how much money it will take. We have done it twice in two companies just at the beginning of the fund. I must admit that although those two companies enter into the clinical during the corona phase, both of them completed it successfully. So now, 2 years after, those two companies are about to submit to the FDA. So we feel very comfortable with what we have promised to our investors, time, money-wise. And this means that those two companies will be able to raise more fund at a higher valuation, which allows us to write profit on our books. So early stage for us is a little bit late stage. We would like to invest in companies that have an history of capital efficiency, meaning that they fulfill all the milestones that they put to themselves in a way that cash was not spent freely, I would say. So we are entering in a reasonable valuation, and what we are trying to work with the company is to build up a pivotal study that will make us comfortable on time and money for this period of time.
Nice, okay. And maybe we'll stay with you, Irit, on this concept of planning for a global expansion. This hits you immediately, it would seem, coming from a fantastic innovation hub but a relatively small med device market. And so when you are doing your planning and investing, how do you typically deal with the wide variation in reimbursement, for example, across the globe?
So our first market, when we look on companies, would be the US.
Okay.
We look on the market in the US, the reimbursement landscape in the US, and the competitive landscape, I would say. We do look on Europe, but this is much more complicated now with the regulatory path and also with the different reimbursement in the different countries. So when we assess any opportunity, it would be US first and then Europe.
Interesting. Yeah, Andy, you have a UK portfolio company, right?
Yeah.
So how did that planning go?
Yeah. Well, oddly enough, the UK-based company is squarely in the not device world and more in the health tech, so we didn't have to worry about that. But I think when we do think about, you know, a company that we're investing in and what is, you know, their eventual market and how they're going to get there, the U.S. is like 99.9% of the time one of the markets that is there and is going to be the one that is a huge value driver. And so if there's a strategic reason to go somewhere else first, sure, you know, we're open to it, I think, but it has to be with the intention of really how do you unlock this opportunity that you're going after. So we're you know, I want to say we're agnostic to it, but really at the end of the day, you know, the U.S. is such a big market, and you don't have a lot of the challenges that you have in Europe. So.
Yeah, recent challenges, I guess.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's one market at the end of the day.
Yeah, interesting. And Lukas, your group has investments all over the world. Now the new fund. Could you describe some of the?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what's been said. I think I can completely confirm what Andy and Irit have been saying. So for us, it's the US is the market we look at first because it's the biggest coherent market that is out there at the moment, with all the insecurity that we had in the last couple of years with Europe, and it's specifically about regulatory questions. We have within our group we have gained significant experience to deal with the FDA, to de-risk the plans, and we've been able to initiate good conversations within each and every case. So we feel that the strategy and the development strategy within the regulatory framework is much more to be calculated from that point of view. So that's why I think US is the first case, unless, as Andy said, there's a strategic reason to go somewhere else. Oh, well,
yeah. Megan, do you have anything to add to that? Or it is remarkable to me. I mean, is the advice to the entrepreneurs, find indications that will initially play well in the U.S., that's the best strategy today.
Yeah, I think I'd echo everything that's been said, but also I think for the types of companies that we most frequently look at, so kind of connected devices that are trying to take cost and expensive procedures out of the system, I think it's actually easier as well to show a benefit in the US, where traditionally, things have been fee for service, and now you're seeing a switch over to kind of more value-based care for certain payers. And so, there's huge value to be had on a per patient basis that you just don't see to the same extent in other markets. And often the US market alone is enough for the company to be successful without necessarily thinking about expanding beyond that.
Okay, interesting. And then just kind of changing up here, and I want to open this question to the panel, so jump in whoever wants to start. But we've decided to base our operations in Europe in Copenhagen, Denmark. And as we run around the region, the Nordics, southern Sweden, Denmark, we've found that the valuations on the companies in those regions are very attractive. And in fact, in the case of Denmark, almost maps directly to the exchange rate, to the US dollar. And so there are fantastic companies in these regions that are a bargain compared to what we're paying for in Silicon Valley and Boston and around North America. So can you guys jump in on that and think how do you balance valuations which ran up through COVID pretty excessively in the States, are coming down a bit, but how does that play into your decision making?
I'll bite on this one just for a little bit. I think one thing, and I'm thinking of the UK-based health tech company that we're invested in. Cost of labor for programmers, software engineers compared to the Bay Area is, it's night and day difference. Mm-hmm. So that's not necessarily thinking directly, okay, what's the relative value of the underlying business, but when you think of what are the size of the raises, what is the capital efficiency with which you can go forward, I think it's definitely a consideration, and in some ways, you can kind of back solve that into some valuations. Whether that's right or wrong is another question, but it's true. I think there is a discount for being in Europe on the valuation side, but I don't know. It's not right.
No, it's a discount, but on the other hand, it's an advantage because if you look for a company and you look for the valuation, you may prefer a UK-based company because of the valuation is much less than a Bay Area company. So I think it is an advantage for the companies themselves when they look for VCs.
I totally agree with that, and I also think in medtech, things often take longer. It's very iterative, and you don't know, when you're going to have to raise more money again. And I think, having a more reasonable valuation just gives founders a little bit more breathing room as well. For if things don't go quite to plan, especially during the early kind of more risky years as well. So I think it is a benefit, and certainly factors into our thinking as well.
Yeah, maybe I'll add on to that. I think because I think one of the things, the problem with a mostly US-based model where valuations are running away, nobody wins in that case. At the end of the day, somebody's going to come. So that company has to do something, and there's an intrinsic value with which it's going to be bought. And if you've inflated that early on,
you just don't have enough money. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think sorry, go ahead.
It's an issue. No.
I was just going to say in the US, I think what we're seeing now, as you said, like valuations are creeping down, but you kind of end up with some companies in a bit of a zombie mode where they don't actually have enough capital to do anything. They're going around trying to raise at valuations that aren't a down round, and it's just really difficult time for everyone and kind of a waste of everyone's time and capital as well.
Yeah. Lukas, you're pensive.
On the seed stage, we're not that much affected, but in the larger scheme of looking at many other companies, it's something that obviously we observed, and I think it's completely right to say in the end, no one really wins here under that circumstances, and it was, from our point of view, pretty clear that at some point the end of the spiral will be reached, and this is a situation that many companies suffer from now.
Yeah, it goes to these partnerships that you have to set up very, very early and build the trust between the funders and the entrepreneurs. And really, I mean, there is an education process by and large for people who are early in the innovation career, and explain that, yes, you do need to have the long view, and you can't just hammer on valuation at the outset.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is really important for entrepreneurs to understand, I would say, the valuation trail in such a way that they will make, at the end of the day, they will make money for the first investor as much as to the last investor. Otherwise, the last investor will take everything. So.
Yeah, which is something that has happened, and you know, I'll come back to maybe one of the reasons why I think it's really not great for the industry as a whole, and especially medtech innovation. You know, we've literally gone to meetings with LPs where they say, well, we're raising our own funds, right? I mean, we have people that we have to go ask money for, and they're saying, well, why should we invest in you when you're doing early stage medtech when all the late stage investors are telling me they can just wipe you out and get your companies for cheap? And we're just like, no, that's not right. That's not right. I mean, you know, it's a continuum, and I think from an ecosystem perspective, we all benefit from really kind of thinking about how valuations should be.
Yes, that long view. Okay, so we're backing up against the lunch hour, but there are a few minutes for questions from the audience, and I would love to take questions if anyone has them. Do we have a mic that we can pass around? Anyone with a question? Oh, right here, please.
I'm curious to ask mainly for the US-based investors, so Andy, for example. How do you view an investment, say, from continental Europe? Because, you know, of the legal, I remember back in the days, like the US VC were very much not looking at something outside US. So how do you really view that? Or other US VC?
Yeah, well, I'll take a bite just because I still have some battle scars from this. But yeah, I mean, it's friction, right? I mean, you know, corporate structures are a little nuanced differently. You know, I guess luckily or not, you know, our only international investment today is in another English-speaking country, so we haven't had to deal with that. I mean, legal costs go through the roof. So it adds friction, but I think from our perspective, you know, if it's a big enough opportunity, forget it. You know, like the legal costs are just something that you have to deal with, and you do it. So.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's, you know, it's a cost of doing business, but I think, you know, the right team, the right technology is much more important than something like that. So yeah, we're definitely open to companies in mainland Europe as well.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, please. Yeah.
Just to build on that question, I'd be curious to know if there are any advice in terms of things that people have done right or wrong. If you're an American, a U.S. company trying to go to a European investor, or vice versa, where you have the is there any kind of, it's not the same and it comes out in maybe a good or a bad way?
Yeah, so I think one thing probably is, you know, sometimes is lacking in very early stage companies in Europe is a nuanced understanding of the US kind of payer structure and how that, you know, how that can impact your eventual value of your company. The technology might be better than something in the US, but if you don't understand exactly how it fits in, exactly who the right payer to go after is, and you know exactly what the market then that you're truly targeting is, then you know you're leaving a lot of value on the table. So I think for European entrepreneurs, it's really, really important to try and understand the you know the US market landscape if that's kind of where you're looking.
Anyone else want to have any ideas or thoughts on that?
We have another question, so.
No, it's not a question.
All right.
It's just a comment on, for a US company, it's maybe just an impression, but I have the feeling that going to raise from a European VC, continental Europe VC, at least in software maybe, you divide maybe by 2 or 3 the valuation. So I don't know really if it makes sense or if it happens, but yeah. That's, I mean, I'm curious to get your thoughts.
I have a kind of a slightly I'll reach on to one of my partners' experience in raising money, and this was, probably 10 years ago, and so I think things have changed a little bit. But early stage medtech funding is difficult. I mean, you're all entrepreneurs. You all know it's not easy, and so the scarcity of capital makes it difficult. And so I think valuations are certainly a part of the equation. But at the end of the day, if you have something transformational and you're trying to get it out there, like, find a way to fund it. Not everything is venture fundable. I mean, and I'm going to say that even though I kind of disagree with the premise of it, but I'm going to say that. And so I think, yeah, valuations might be different, but at the end of the day, yeah.
The diligence scrutiny, at least my experience was that in Europe, there is much more scrutiny in continental Europe of strategic VC than in some of the US.
Could be.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll say we're fairly informal.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to leave it there. And thanks everybody so much. I think, as Andy just mentioned, and all of us have, it's not easy to fund and build a medtech company. But there are good people who are very motivated to help out, and it's these partnerships and a view on the long haul that are most important. And so thank you very much, everyone, for this panel, and thanks to the audience. We'll see everybody in the hallways.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Greg.